Okay, so let's look at this. You guys can see my screen?
Yeah, I mean, we can see.
All right, okay, great. So uh, let's see. The first one. So array with ranges. So I have an array A, and the ranges are like 1, 3. So it's basically 1 to 7, 1 to 1 to 3, 1 to 7, and 2 to 4, right? Uh, if I draw this on a timeline, uh, you would see those ranges, right? Now, the output should be if there are complete overlap. So 1 and 3 would completely overlap. So 1 and 3 is actually subset of 1 and 7, right? Do you guys see it?
Subset you subset. Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yes.
No, go ahead.
Subset means it's completely a part of it. It's not a partial.
Yeah, it's like 1 and 3. It comes like 3 comes between 1 and 7, so that's
Right.
why it's 1 3 subset of 1 7.
No, so yeah, 1, 2, 3 is also inside one with the 1 and 7. One basically these are ranges, right? So that's why I say array with ranges. So the first in A element in array A, you have 1, 2, 3. So that means 1, 2, 3. The second one is 1, 7, which means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Uh, so these are ranges, right? So the range 1 to 3 is also part of 1 to 7, right? So that's what you need to find. So
now I think I can do it.
Yeah. Okay.
Like
So what I'm gonna do, I'm not gonna do it today. Please try to finish it because this should be now simple, right? Uh,
Yeah.
okay.
We can try that next try.
Yeah. Okay. And then we can go through the next one. The second one is actually from elements of given array. Create an array with all possible odd even pairs, right? So here I have 2, 5, 7, 8, right? So uh, 2 and 8 are even numbers, and 5, 7 are odd numbers, right? So all the possible would be you need to pair all the even numbers with all the odd numbers. So let's start with all the even numbers. So I can take 2 and then I can pair it with 5 and 7, right? So 2, 5, 2, 7. Then I take 8 and I pair with 8, 5, 8, 7. There is no 2, 8 because they are both even numbers. Got it?
Yeah, I was able to separate out like 2 5 7 8 like odd and even. Then I took the odd even numbers array. I was trying to get that 2 5 like 2 8. I was trying to take the first two.
Yeah.
Trying to create an array for 2 5 and 2 5 and 2 7. But there I was like how to do that. That's where I.
So the way Hamid, I would approach this problem is, so let's say I have this array, right? So you take the first, so you iterate through the whole array. So take the first number, which is 2, right? Then you can look at the next number, 5, right? So if so, I already know what my what this number is, right? Which is even number. So if it's an even number, look for all the odd numbers from that point on, right? So I'm gonna look through first 5. If it's odd, then make a pair and push into a new array. Otherwise, don't do anything, right? Then look to 7. So 2 is 2, 7. If it's an odd number, you will have to make a pair and push it to an array. If then comes 8, you don't do anything with 8. Okay. Now take the 5. So when you first cycle iteration, take 5. Then you don't have to look back to 2 again, right? So 5 looks at 7. It's a odd, so no problem. Don't do anything. 5, 8. Yes, you need to create a pair. Then look to 7, and you always look at the forward. So 7, 8 makes a pair. That's it. Okay. So let's build the algorithm here. So the way I would do is, if I take a JS fiddle and let's say I would look at this array, right? So I would say this, all right, and then remember, if I want to iterate through this array, I can use for off loop, right? So I can say for let I, I'll use a val because this is a value of a. Okay. Now this would give me 2, 5, 7, and 8, right? If I do for loop. Now I have to do another for loop. I have to do another for loop. Okay. So what I would do is, instead of doing for off loop, I can do regular for loop. So I can say for let I. So this will be index that I'll be moving, equal to. Well, you know what? Actually, I would need index here as well. Let's just do key and index. It's frozen somehow. Yeah, I'm gonna. Somehow it's frozen. Okay, I have to. Jeez, I don't know what happened. All right, let me close this. Let's do regular for loop instead. So for let I equal to 0, right? Because we're starting from the index. And length always do separately. So I would just say len let len equal to a dot length, right? All right. Now, when I iterate through, I would say, well, I less than len I plus plus, right? Okay, so this would iterate through, similarly, this would iterate through all the numbers. Now, second for loop, what I need to do is, I need to start from the 1, so whichever I is, right? So right now I is 0, so I need to start from I equal to 1, right? So the second for loop, yeah, so j would be I plus 1. 1. Okay, up to the length. And you also do like j, okay? All right. Now what I need to do is, so first I need to figure out my number is even or odd. So how do you find something if something is even or odd? Do you guys know that? Yeah. Modulo operator. Yeah. Modulus of 2. Yes. Yeah. So if I can take I, and then I would say modulo of 2, right? If this gives me 0, which means it's an even number, right? So actually I don't really need to check if it's 0. All I have to do is this. Okay, so if this, then this is an even number, right? So I can have some sort of status here. Let's set a status here. So let is even, okay, equal to, let's put it as null initially, right? And if this is the case, then is even equal to true, right? Else it's false. Right? Now what I need to do, okay? So now what I need to do here, so now if my number is, now I know that the first number, let's say, is even. So now I need to look for all the odd numbers from that point on, from the next, right? So I would have to do the same thing from here, okay? So now here I can say if is even. So if this number is even, I'm looking for odd, right? So actually, all I have to do, I don't even need then in this case. Well, I should just do this one time, only one time. Otherwise, let's just keep it that way. So if it's even, then I would say if a j, I need to figure out if this is even or not, right? So if this is, oh, you know what? Let's check odd, which is much easier. Is if not is even, right? Which if it's not even, and in this case we are looking for all the even number in the second loop, right? So if this means it's an even, then what I would do, I would take I would have to create a new array. This should be at the end, GTH, and I would call it result array, const result array, right? Equal to an empty array. Now what I would do now from here is I would have to push it, right? So I would say result dot push I would take a empty array, and then first push my AI, and let's see. Oh, you know what? Yeah, I can create an empty array here. I think that's better. So I would just const well, and let's just call it
That's
n.
where my confusion was.
Yeah, so
that's where, like, I was not able to do. I came up to this point. You know what I did? I didn't create that many loops. What I did is, like, I took the first entire array. I used the map functions, which was generating the two array. One is your odd and one is the even.
Okay.
And for each even array, I was trying to create a Cartesian product, like so for the even and odd.
Okay.
That's where that's the trick. Like if I would have started using this new array here, then I think I should have got the results here.
Okay.
That's where I was a little stuck,
Yeah.
Go ahead. I was just saying, like I was trying in that way.
Yeah. So need to think about that. I need to push an array, right? So I have to create an empty array here again, and then what I would do is, if that's the case, then take the new array. Then you need to first push AI, which is the first number. Then also you need to push n dot push AJ, right? Okay. And then I would push the entire n into the result array. Okay. Yeah. All right. So now that's for even. Okay. Now what if it's an odd? If it's an odd, then I would have to do a little bit opposite, right? So in that case, I have to say if, and a lot of this can be shortened. I'm just doing a little bit longer. I can say, right. I can say not equal to 0, right? And so I already know this is odd. So yeah, so this should be, so this is even, and then we are trying to push odd. Okay. So yeah, so this is the algorithm. And let's see now, once it's done, all I have to do, I'm sure there are some probably tiny issues, but let's just try to see if it really works. So if I do console log R, say what do I get? There might be fewer bugs, but let's see. Okay, R is not defined. R is not defined. Oh, not R result. Okay. All right. See, 2 5 2 7 5 7 5 7 should not be there. So there is some issue. So the answer should be 2 5 7 8. Yeah, 5 7 should not be. So there is an issue. Let's see what's the issue might be. Let me tidy up. Okay, I have to debug it now a little bit closer. Okay, so let's look at from the beginning. So if can be divided, let's just do it equal to 0. Then here sometimes these parentheses makes a difference. I'm not sure if it's gonna make a difference. It's probably not making a difference. Okay, but all right. So all right. So let's do one thing. Okay, how do we debug? So which is very important, right? So first thing, what I'll do, if I get in this situation, right? I would first need to look at through here. Is my even and odd is coming correctly or not, right? So what I would do, I would simply console log is even, right? I already know 5 7 2 5 7 8, so I should be getting true false false true, right? So true false false true, which is correct. So that is correct. All right, let's move to the next. Okay, now here if is even, if is not even, which means this is odd, then we are looking for number that is, oh no, this is correct. We are trying to divide AJ by 2, which is correct. And if AJ is, if this is even, right, then we are pushing it here, right? So let's console log n here. Okay, so I'm just gonna remove this from here. All right, So it is correct. Oh, 5 and 7 twice. 5 and 7. Okay. Okay, so there is a problem here. I should not be getting 5 and 7 because they're both odd. Okay.
Hemel, like here we did odd in if, so everything will be inside if condition would be odd, right?
So this is more like this. If this is even.
But before it you said like is odd. There is if condition. This thing is already in if condition, which is odd.
Right. No. So this are you talking about line 20?
Yeah, line 20 is like if condition, it's odd, right? So everything after the line 20 and between the line 20 and 26 would be the odd, right?
No, it should be even. Remember, we are saying if I, okay, for Sahil, let's say if I look at 2, right? So 2, we determine if it's even or odd. So in this case, it would be even, right? 2. Now from 5 to 7, we are looking for now odd numbers to pair it with, right? So here we did the same thing. If even, which is a 2, then look, this is not even, this is odd, right? So here it would be, if it's even, then look for odd numbers, right? So I think I fixed it. I think that was the problem, hopefully. Let's see. Let's remove this. I think that was a problem. Okay, so it was this. I should have said equal to 0. That was the problem. That was problem. Now I'm getting 2, 5, 2, 7, 5, 8, and 7, 8.
What was previous? What you corrected?
Oh, so here when I do modulo, I was just doing this. Okay. So it's supposed to be 0. No, that means it's true, which means, yeah, it works a little. So I needed to say it's if it's equal to 0, right? Then it makes it even. Yeah, and then here it says odd, which is not equal to 0, right? Okay. All right. By the way, today we're gonna start with functions, and we're also going to move to some start CSS fundamentals. Okay, so let's look at the last question, and then we can start.
I will just one doubt
Sure.
from here. From line 20. Okay. Can you explain a little bit? Yeah. Can you it's an odd, right?
So okay. So lines 20 would be, let's look at it. So let's take an odd number. So let's say you come to 5. So here we did the first loop, right? And here we are. Let's say I equal to 1, which would give us 5, right? So let's run through this. So if it's 5, if I divide it by 2, there'll be a remainder, right? Which means it is even equal to false, correct? You understand that part?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is basically nothing but odd. Is even equal to false, which it's odd. Okay. Now what we are doing is, if it's 5, then we need to look from fly plus 1, which is 7, and 8. We need to examine these two numbers if it matches with 5 in terms of odd even pair, right? So now since 5 is odd, we are looking for only even numbers, right? So let's start from the next number, which would be, let's say, 7, right? So what's going to happen here, that the next number will be 7, okay, which will be AJ. So if it's 7 modulo, so this would say if is even equal to odd, which is our 5 is odd, so it only goes into this if statement, right? Now it will say if 7, which is the next number, if it's divided by 2 equal to 0. No, this would not work, right? Because if you divide 7 by 2, you will get a remainder, so it won't work. So then it would go to the next number, which is 8. Okay, so 8 divided by 2 equal to 0. I mean, a remainder 0. So you'll get 5 and 8. So it will push first 5 into the array. It will create that, it created this new array here, right? So it will push 5 into the array and 8 into the array. And then it would push the entire array, 5 and 8, into the result array. Okay. So.
Yeah, get it. Now I get it.
Okay.
Can you send this solution so that I can practice
sure,
it
yeah.
a little bit more?
Sure, let me, yeah.
And one more thing, I am not able to see the video. So are you sharing this recording?
Yes, I have shared. Hold on, I'll show you where it is, where the video is.
Yeah. I was trying to go through the last week video. I was not able to somehow
okay.
Get into that. Yeah.
Okay. So if you go to Classroom. If you go to About, I don't know what you can see, but if you see About, here the videos are.
1 minute. I have to go to Google
Classroom.
classes. Where is the about to do? There is a to do, and there is a class done.
Anybody else was able to see?
Yeah, I was able to see that.
I found now.
Okay, good. All right.
Yeah, I found.
It will take, usually after the class, it would take me at least 1 or 2 days to do it, because it requires me to, it takes like almost 2-3 hours. So
yeah, got it.
Okay. So usually by Monday you can expect it to be there. Okay.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
All right. Okay. So let's look at the second problem. Okay. So the second problem was how to deep copy following object. So I just did that in the answer here. Let's see. Okay, so I had an object like this. All right. Let me just. I know we haven't gone through recursion, but I'll show you how it works. Okay. Okay, so let's say you have an object like this: profile, name, age, and then it has kids, which is another object, and all that stuff, right? Now, what I need to do is I need to go through, in order to deep copy. Do you remember what the deep? Do you know what the deep copy really means? When I just do simple copy, I need to take everything that is just a primitive type. So here, name is string, right? It's not an object. Age is also a number, which is not an object, right? But kids is an object. It's an array actually, right? So if I can create a new object called new profile, and then I can iterate through it, I can say name equal to name, age equal to age. But kids, I cannot simply do kids equal to kids. I have to go deeper, and then what I need to do is I would go all the way until I get primitive values like strings and numbers, and then I copy it. Okay, so here's the algorithm. It will take a little bit time for you to understand, because I know we haven't done the recursive part. So let's understand it. So we have a function. Well, this is a arrow function, but we haven't looked at the arrow function. But think of this as like function, right? Something like this. Okay, so it takes this object, which is this. Now, again, recursive. How many of you know recursive?
Yeah, I have idea, but I always got confused.
Okay.
While problem solve.
I know Sahil doesn't know.
It's like calling the function itself.
Yeah, calling the function itself. Now,
I watched videos on YouTube for recursive.
oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So one thing is, Chandra will be joining little later on. Okay. Hey Herschel, can you hear me still? You can just type in the chat if you can't hear me. I cannot hear you somehow. Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Okay. So, all right. So what we'll do is, okay. So recursive is nothing but you take a bigger problem, right? And if it's the same thing repeating itself, right, then you don't have to code all those stuff. You just need to find out what is a repeating thing, and they just code for that. So here, the repeating thing, and it will take a little bit time. I'll go through this in much detail. I just wanted to see. This is a hard question, right? I wasn't expecting you guys to finish this if you don't know recursion, right? But what I wanted to do is just give you a chance to understand what it is. And I believe in failures. If you fail, you will learn. Okay? And the way it works is when you fail, you try to do something and you cannot do it, you struggle, you try everything, it doesn't work. It actually registers in your brain saying that, okay, I tried this, doesn't work, I tried this, doesn't work, right? If everything is smooth, you're not going to remember that. So that's why I want you to fail. So from now on, I'll just give you a little bit easier. And then maybe one problem would be harder, like this, where you have to really struggle to actually get things right. But ultimately, what you need to do here is you have a profile, which is an object. All you have to do is iterate through the whole thing, right? So get each value, okay? And if the value is a primitive type, primitive means if it's a numbered string or Boolean, okay, then simply create a new object and copy this name into that object, okay? You don't have to do anything more, right? But if you encounter an object, what do you in that case? Well, it's the same thing. The profile is an object, right? So you need to repeat the same thing. In the object, you got to look at, oh, is this, do you have a name, age? It has the same thing, right? So if you encounter the object, you repeat the same thing over and over until you reach end of the where you have all the primitives, right? I know it's hard to understand, but let's look at it. So first thing I'm going to do is when you deep copy, I would look at the object. Remember how to determine if something is an array or object. So if something is primitive, you can use type of, right? So you can say type of name would be string, right? Type of age would be number, right? But type of kids would be what? An array, right? So if an array has what? Array has functions like push, pop, right? So if I simply do this, if the object I encounter, if it has push method, then I'm going to create an array, new array, which is R. Otherwise, I'll create an object. Okay, so this line basically takes care of if because I need to determine, okay, is this profile an array or an object? In this case, it's an object, right? So the new clone it will create, it would be an object. Okay, now it will iterate through the whole thing. So let's iterate. To remember, you can do for in loop, or you can use this way, let kv and this, right? Then for each item, which will be name, age, kids, it will basically see if is this a type of object? If the answer is yes, then take its value, which is this, and repeat the whole thing again. Then it will, this is, you see the deep copy, I'm calling the deep copy from inside the deep copy. And I'm passing now kids into recursive. So you would get, this would be kids, and then it would say, oh, is it an object or an array? In this case, kids is an object, array, right? So we'll create an array, and then it would go through again. And let's say if it's primitive value, if it's not an object, then you simply just take the R, which is going to be the copy, and then you just add name and age to it, right? And then return it. I know it's a lot to understand, but I would suggest just debug, put console logs everywhere, and debug it.
Emil, I'm sorry. Can you repeat again the whole?
Okay.
Sorry for that.
Yeah.
I didn't understand line 26. I got confused.
Line 26. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Line 26 is very simple. These are the tools you will require when you try to solve larger problem. How do you know if I know this is an object? Okay, that's why I'm passing it, right? I know this is an object, right? Now, is it a regular object or an array? What's the difference? Object has curly brackets and array has square brackets, right, around it. So how do you determine? So only arrays have push method, right? So let's so I can actually create a new JS filter and I can show you. So let's say if I created let object equal to this kind of object, right? Now I want to know if this is a regular object or an array. So if I object dot push, is this gonna work? No, because this is not an array, right?
Yeah.
So if I console log, what would happen? It would go an error, right? Well, I'm not executing it. Remember, I'm not doing this. I'm just printing the definition of push, right? So it will be undefined. Yeah.
I think errors doesn't. Sure, it's not working. Yeah, it's not working because might be
sorry.
Yeah, definitely.
That's what I have to do. I think you have to do dot proto, because remember it's in a prototype method. I know we haven't looked at the so if you do proto dot push, you know what, let me just do proto, see if it's there.
Something happened to your maybe bin JS reader.
Yeah, something is, sometimes it doesn't work as I expected.
So Hemil, in the solution, in the answer, you were expecting the primitive values like string or number or any primitive value.
Yes.
Can you show the answer?
Oh, it's actually the one behind. That's why I had another console open. That's why. Okay, let me close it. Okay, let me just first show you this, right? So if I take any object and if I do proto, and if I look at it, I would get its proto, right? So all the methods that you see for the object would be available here, like toString, value of, things like that, right? We haven't looked a lot of these methods, but if you look at the array, which is square brackets, and if I look its proto, okay, I would get one of the method would be push here, right? Push right here. Okay. So if I say dot push, let me see, then I would get the definition of the push method right here. Okay. So now if I change this to an object, what would it do? It doesn't really have push method because object has its own methods, right? Then it would get undefined. So that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm saying if it has a push method, then create an array. Otherwise, create an object. This is that shorthand for if else.
Yeah. Now I understood.
Okay. So you create that an empty array or object.
Can I ask you?
Sure.
Can I ask you one question?
Sure.
I was doing solving one problem. See, I was solving that. There was a question in our second homework. It was like something. There was an expression string, and I was trying to solve that problem.
Okay.
So I was facing one of the step was to read that number from the string from the array. Check whether that is a number or a operator.
Okay.
So, but the input was string. The thing, because I split that.
Yeah.
I split the string into array.
Yeah.
So as soon as you split, you got each individual number into array as a string, right?
Yeah.
Then that string, I wanted to find out whether it's a number or an operator.
Or array. Kind of operator, yes.
Plus, minus. Yeah. So I how to do that, I was like thinking like what to be used to find out whether either there are two things. Either it could be a number or it could be an operator. So,
okay. That is okay. I know what it means. So let's say if I have for example, plus sign, right?
Yeah.
Right? And I can have let. So this would be an operator, right?
Yeah.
Right? These are very important skills, right? So then, or you have another one which is just a regular character, C.
Regular character.
We just call it CH character. Okay. Now I need to find out which one is actually regular character and which one is actually an operator, right? Okay. So for that, JavaScript has I think it's called JavaScript. It has ASCII. You have to look at the. You need to find out what's the ASCII. So there is a thing called character code at. I think that's the one. Let's just look at it. Yeah. So let's look at it anyway. It's actually important to you mentioned. So.
Yeah, I struggled for a day.
Yeah.
I don't want to look into the internet, trying to find, I don't want to copy the solutions which has been provided.
Yeah.
That's why, I was trying to build some kind of algorithm.
No, that is an important thing. You need to figure out if it's a character or a string, right? So if I do, let's say, console.
Now it's like, as you mentioned, now it's going to.
Yeah.
The main thing is the ASCII character and find it out,
Okay.
That way I can
from character code. Let's see if it's. I think it's not the character code. Let's see. It's
I
not
got the
clue.
I think I'll try to find it out. And
Yeah. It's there's a so basically if it's an ASCII. I mean, if it's a regular character, then it will be within that range, right? And if it's outside the range, then you know it's an operator. That's how it. So if you look at the ASCII, ASCII codes, right? Yeah.
Now I've found the clue, so I'll find it out. The ASCII character, I'll get that.
Okay. Okay. Maybe I'll give you guys homework next time to do that.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay.
This is kind of, that's the problem solved.
Yeah. No, these are the things you really need to know, because when you try to solve a problem, then you get to a point where you have to do this, right? Is this a character or is it an operator? Then you kind of get stuck, and you cannot move further, right? So these are the tools you need to build, really. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, everybody got this now. That if it's a simple, regular value like array or a number, then you basically add that key into the new array, which is we just created R, and it just copy from it. But if it's an object, then you can actually recurse it. Say, hey, now recurse through it and give me the answer, right? So, but I'll put this into so that you guys can look at it. And just I would suggest is put a console log to look to see what's happening here.
Can you show the solution?
Yeah. So this is the
answer.
Yeah, this is the solution.
No, the in console window.
The console. Yeah, sure. Okay, hold on. I think everything has a different window. I think that's why. Okay. Okay. Yeah. You see, it does it all the way down. If I stringify it, I would see it, right? So if I do console log JSON, remember how to do that? JSON dot stringify. Yes, let me see. String 5. I think that's the one. Now you see the whole thing, right? But as a string. Yeah. Okay. So I would suggest just play around with it and you will understand. But see how easy it is, like maximum 10 lines. And this could be 15 level deep and it would solve the problem. You don't have to do much. Okay. All right, so let's move to so now you know how to solve some of the stuff. I would suggest just go back and fix it, and even from the first and second homework, see if you have some problems, right? And try to fix it. Now it will become easier now, as we go along. Okay. All right, so now let's start with functions today. Okay, so functions in JavaScript. Anybody know how many different types of functions there are in JavaScript?
Basically, as far as I know, there are two types. One is your functions with a name.
Okay.
And there is your functions without a name. So named function and anonymous function, I would say. That's what. And is there anyone an immediate invoke function?
So basically, if you look at, yes, those are also kind of functions, but so there are two. We can actually, it's not a simple answer. The way to write function is, in Java we used to write something like this, right? Function, and then you have a number. you can say add, and you can do n1 and n2, right? Okay, so this is one type of function. Here you would have a function keyword, and then the name of the function, and then you in the parentheses you would have your parameters that you're passing, or argument should I say, and the function body, right? This is one type of function. Inside what happens we don't care. I just want to show you how to write the function, right? The second type of function is called, so this is called function declaration. And these are important thing to, did I spell wrong declaration? Yeah. It is important to know all this stuff because when you go for an interview, you should just simply use this word. Oh, this is a function declaration. Usually what happens, we don't know the name, so we just say, well, this type of function, is this, and it doesn't look very professional. Also, your brain needs to get used to this terminology. It's very important, right? The second type of is I can write the same function in a different way. Remember, you said anonymous function, right? So this. Okay, let's write a body inside so we know. Let's say which returns n1 plus n2, right? And the same way it does this here. Okay. And hey, Bhuvneshwari, are you getting all the? Can you hear us and everything? You're getting. If you have any question, please feel free to write it in the chat. Okay. I know you cannot. Okay, good, good. All right. So the second kind of function. So this is, as I said, this is a named function, right? So it's a function declaration. This one doesn't have a name, right? And so this is called anonymous function. So I'm very bad at spelling, so I'm just gonna Google it. Okay, N-O, yeah, anonymous, you spell it like this. Anonymous function, which means something that doesn't have name. That's all it means, anonymous. All right. So how do you? So this function, you can call it simply. You can just say add, right? 1 and 2. How do you call this function? The second one, since it doesn't have a name. Anyone?
Yeah, this function basically we used during the callbacks.
Yes.
Suppose you have a array, you want to iterate through the array, you have a for each. Just pass anonymous function what you wanted to do. So that kind of scenario basically we use, but not in detail. I don't know.
Okay.
What are the other?
Okay, so I'll give you the answer. So whenever you're just gonna use something one time, you don't need to name it.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Because naming would be you define it and you call it. And you can call it multiple times, right? So in the first one, I can take add 1, 2, or I can say 2, 2, something like this, right? Here, I really don't want to call it multiple times. So the way to call an anonymous function is, remember, there are multiple use for it. So one use would be immediately invoked function expression. So what you do, you take the anonymous function. This is called immediately invoked function expression. Okay, so what you do is just literally take the function, entire function, and wrap it with parenthesis, and then execute it. Okay, this means I'm defining it here and I'm executing it at the same time. Right, so this is one of the use for anonymous function, because what I'm trying to do is, since I'm only going to use it once, I can just do it now, right? So define a function, I don't need to give it a name, and simply execute it in the same line. So from this point on, I cannot really call this function, right? Because I don't have a name for it, right? A second use of anonymous function is I can actually give it a name or save into a variable. So what I would do is I can say const add equal to this. Right? This is called function expression. So what I did here, I can, just like any object, I can save this function into another variable. And I can execute it the same way as I did for the function declaration. All I have to do is add 1, 2, and it works the same way, right? So most of the time you need to use either this kind of function, which is function declaration, or function expression, right? In JavaScript, I would say forget about this guy, function declaration. Never use it. Okay? Only use function expression, right? Function expression is nothing but saving an anonymous function into a variable. Does it make sense?
Yep.
Right? So you have an anonymous function. You will never use an anonymous function like this, so I'm just going to remove it. Okay? So there are two ways to use an anonymous function. Use it right away. We will look at this in later on. Okay? Or you can save in the variable and use it later on. So this is a simple way to describe it, how to use a function in JavaScript. Okay? So forget about the first type. You know why it's problematic to use function declaration? Anybody knows? This is an interview question, by the way. What's the difference between function declaration and function expression? So what's the difference between this kind of function and this kind of function?
In the function expression, you wrap the function inside a variable, right?
Yeah.
And you're referring to that variable, but there it's like, it's more or less same. Looks like, add and there.
Yes, it's more or less same, but there is a huge difference in terms of how JavaScript looks at them. Okay, so let's look at it. So I'm just gonna call this add D, which means declaration, and I'm just gonna remove this for now, and I'm just gonna call it expression means E. Okay. Now let's execute them. So if I take the function declaration, and what I'm gonna do here, it's defined, right? I'm gonna use it before it's defined. Okay, both of them. And this one I will use 2 2 so we can know what the right. Now we already know that this will not work because any definition, any variable that is defined, it cannot exist before its definition, right? Any or constant let. Var is different story, it will be undefined, but it won't exist before. So if I run this, oh, I shouldn't do E actually. Okay, so the first one I'm getting 3, which is function declaration. Second one, it's saying add E is not defined, which means because it's saved in a variable, it behaves like a variable, right? And variables don't exist before its definition, right? So this variable exists from this point on. So if I try to call it before, it's not going to work. But function declaration, the way JavaScript works is when it scans the whole JavaScript, it actually takes all the declaration that is defined inside the, and then it actually puts it on the top of the, it's almost like hoisting. It just puts it on top of the thing. It's almost like as if they exist before, like this. But expression, so that's why it's kind of a bad thing to have it exist before its definition, right? So that's why I never use the function declaration. Always use function expression from now on. But remember this answer anyway, so that you could you can answer this in an interview, because sometimes they ask you, like the last interview I had, the person asked me this question. Okay, so everybody got this? Any questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Hemil, I would have one question, not related to this, but related to functions.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, like most of the times when I'm working with function, so suppose like here I'm in function, if you go for function expression add E, I suppose I'm getting some value. Just suppose like there is a value, let name is equal to Hemil. Okay. And I want to use that name variable in another function. How can I use it?
Oh yeah, you can use it. So here I have a add E, right? So if I create another function, let's say I create another function, const, let's say B or something, right? Equal to, it's also a function expression. Because it's a function expression, I can use it. So here, I can simply use it here like this. Right? So let's say I'm just going to remove the declaration since we don't have to use it anymore. Okay? Now, I need to now execute B, right? So when I execute B, so what happens when I execute B, add E would get executed inside, right? And add is nothing but this, right? So I can
no. Like, can you go to this add function?
Okay.
Inside the add function body.
Okay.
Inside it, yeah.
Okay, here, yeah.
Yeah. Can you define some variable and assign a value to it?
Sure. So let's say let x equal to 1, right? Something like this, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that x, I want to use it in the B.
All right. So have we covered the scope, by the way?
Yeah, I do it with global scoping. Like I define this, like I'll put X as a global scope, then I'll use it. But I don't think so. It's good.
Oh, okay. So okay, let me. Okay, so you guys don't know how this is called lexical scoping. Okay, so before we go through the function, let's understand the lexical scoping, because function follows the scoping. So any variable, let's try to understand that. I think it's very important. Do you guys know what lexical scope means? Have you heard of that before?
Yeah. Like inner functions has access to all the variables of the outer functions.
Yes.
And outer function has access to only a variable to the variable which is declared global.
Yes.
So inner functions, so that way. So outer function cannot access the variable declared in the inner functions. But inner functions has access to outer functions as well as global variables. That's how I guess.
Yeah.
That's
So
scoping, right?
yeah. So instead of saying functions, let's call it blocks.
Blocks. Yeah.
Okay. So what is a block? So let's say lexical scope. Okay. What is a block really means? So before we understand scope, we need to understand what is a block really means. If I do this is a block. Okay. So anything that is this is basically called a block. Anything that is between a curly bracket. If I do if statement, this is another block. If I do while loop, this is also a block, right? Same thing with functions. So let's say if I have let f equal to a function, this is also a block, right? So these are blocks, and so you need to understand what is really a block means. Now if I, within this for loop, if I have an if statement, right, then I've created a block inside a block. Okay, so lexical scoping really means that variable defined in the upper outer block is automatically available inside. So for example, think of this as a global scope, right? Because this is all the way outside. So if I define something like let a equal to 1, where is it available? Everywhere, right? Because it's defined outside all the way, so it's available everywhere inside, right? So for example, think of this way. You have a prime minister of India, right? So anywhere in the India, you can say, oh, my prime minister, right? And you will only have one answer, right? But if I am inside Maharashtra and I would say my governor, and if I'm inside Gujarat and if I say my governor, the answer would be different, right? Because think of Maharashtra as a one block or Gujarat as another block. But India itself is a one block. But if I'm in Australia and if I say my prime minister, then the Modi is not the prime minister of Australia. So now it's a different, we are inside the different block. So if I look at that way, So let's create a block called India, right? And it's going to be, let's say, if statement. And I'm just going to say true. This means it always execute. If true, run this, means it's always going to be true, right? So let's say this is an India. Okay. So this guy is, let's say, World Health Organization. Let's call it WHO, president, right? WHO, let's just say. Okay, it is equal to WHO. You know, the World Health Organization, which is recognized throughout the world, right? Okay, so if I try to access, if I ask somebody inside console log WHO, they would know, right? Because it's defined outside. So any block that is defined, it should have it, right? Now let's say in India we have another block, and we're gonna call this Bihar. Okay. Now here I can put let PM equal to Modi, right? So this is India. So I have a PM, which is Modi, and I have two blocks. One is Bihar, and one is, let's say, MP, right? So if I just console log here PM, I can access PM from both Bihar and MP, right? Because PM is defined inside the India block, which means it's outer of Bihar and MP, right? But Bihar guy cannot see anything defined inside the MP, and MP guy cannot. So let's say if I have Bihar governor, right? Let's say governor. I don't know. Is that a Lalu Prasad Yadav or something? Okay, I don't know. Okay, and then I have a MP governor. We just gonna call, I don't know who it is, but we're gonna call it XYZ. Okay, now if I try to console log MP governor from Bihar, this would be false. Let's say MP governor. This won't be available, right? Because it's defined within this block. So outer block for MP is actually India, and outer block from India is this, the whole rest of the space, right? So do you get that concept?
Yeah, but the thing is, like, suppose I want to access the Bihar government, this one MP, you write Lalu inside this MP. What we can do?
You can do it. So what you have to do in this case is there are multiple ways to do it. One thing you would do is you can create a function or something outside. So I can create a function here. So let's say let or const get let's say get MP or something, right? Okay. This function would take an argument. let's say you can pass something to it. Again, this is going to be in a different lecture because I haven't taught you the closures and all that stuff, right? But let's look at it. So you have this function, and you can say it has some argument. Say g, and then console log return g. Okay, or something like this. Okay, so what I can do here is I can since this is inside, I have to use closure to do that. Okay, so I would do is I can create a variable, something that is outside. So let, you know what, the simple way to do it is let outer MP equal to, let's define it a null. Okay, then when to come to Bihar here, you would just simply do outer MP equal to Bihar Gulf, right? And then here you would just say console log outer MP. Let's remove this.
So that's how I do it. So is it good way to do, like I was thinking like I should not define something.
First of all, you should not be using any one block's variable into another block.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So try to structure your code such that it's not the. So let's run this. It would work, but
yeah, it works. Like that's how I do it. Like usually,
yeah.
I define it globally.
Or the another one was a function that I was talking about, right? You would basically create a function outside, and then function returns another function that you can use from outside the scope. Okay, something like this. But I try not to. I would try. So why do we have local? Why do we have a block variables? Do we know why? Why do we have block? Block variables should be what happens to the variable Bihar government once it exits this block. It dies actually. It's get garbage collected. Okay. So the way it works is JavaScript looks at the first line, who, and it remembers is who. Then it would come to inside this thing, and it would remember this guy, which is PM. Then it would come inside this block, and then it would remember this for within this block. But as soon as it goes outside this block, this is deleted. This doesn't exist anymore. The only way it can exist is because I copied into here, and now it actually exists inside the outer. So even if this dies, it's here, right? And then I can use it here. And that's the only way you can use it. That is why we have defined lexical scoping, because anything that you want to use in both, you need to define outside both. So define, if I want to use this here, then I should define it outside, right? Makes sense? If it's inside a block, it should be only available inside. Also another rule, you cannot redefine the same variable inside. So I cannot do, let's say, Gandhi. Okay, this is not allowed. Okay, you see it gave you an error. P is already declared. However, I can do this. I can reassign the value and it's fine. But I cannot redefine it again. I cannot use let, but I can use a PM here. So let's look at this. What if I do this? PM equal to Gandhi here. Would this work? Or let PM, sorry. This would work, right? So within a block, you can redefine your, so variable should not be redeclared within the same block, which I'm not doing. So within this block, there is only one, which is this guy. Within this block, there is only one, which is this guy. Within this block, which is this guy, right? These two are actually inner blocks, so it's fine. But I cannot do it here. So what if I console log it PM here? What do I get? Modi. Why? If I console log here and here, so let's just call it Gandhi 1 and Gandhi 2 or something. Right? So within this block is this value, within this block is this value, but as soon as you go outside, again, because it's this variable will stay for the whole block, right? This is only being shadowed here. So as soon as I take this line out, now it will be this PM, because remember, by lexical scoping, it's automatically available inside. So now I have Modi here, and then there's a Gandhi here. If I remove this guy here, then it's everywhere that guy, same guy, right? Any question on this? This is quite important, the scoping. So define your variable accordingly. If you need something, that's why for loop, I can define I here. So that's why I can do this, right? I can say for I of A, and I can say console log I, right? And I can reuse this variable here, because this I will die after this for loop. This I will die after this for loop. So I don't have any conflict. But if I have an I here equal to something, then it's not a good idea to actually define. That's why I would try to call it J or something, okay? Make sense? All right. Okay. Okay, so that was a lexical scoping, which is very important to understand. Okay, now let's go back to the function. Because the functions also behave like a variable, they also have to behave. They have to also follow the lexical scoping rule, right? Okay. All right. So let's see. What else do we have? Okay. All right. So let's stop here in terms of JavaScript. Let's start the CSS, since we haven't looked at the CSS. Okay. And then we'll go further into functions more when we do you know also, if I write a function and if I execute it, so let's say if I have X function and if I execute it, what would I get here?
Undefined?
Yes.
Undefined, you're not undefined.
So I'm not returning anything here, right? So by default, you don't have to, functions don't need to return anything, right? It's not mandatory. So if I call it, that means I'm trying to get the what's been returned, right? And since I don't know what's been returned, it would be undefined. Okay. All right, so we'll look at more fundamentals on function next next week, but let's move to now CSS, which is very important. So, how many of you, we haven't looked at CSS at all, right? So, how many of you can say that you're good at CSS? Or if I gave you like okay, between level 1 to 10, where would you put yourself?
I would put at 3.
3, okay.
I just know concept a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, what about Bhuvneshwari? How would you? And Chandra and Herschel and Sahil.
I would say 6 or 7 if it's CSS2, CSS3, like some transitions or all these things I didn't do. But I would say 6 or 7, like
Okay.
CSS.
All right. So Herschel also 6 and 7. Okay. All right. So if I ask you guys to build a layout from scratch, so let's say if I say I want left side scroll, I want to divide the whole page into 2 elements. One is the left side, and then one is right side container, which is a bigger, and then divide them vertically, and then inside I need to divide them horizontally with the content or something like that, without use of any kind of bootstrap or something like that. Um, and yeah, no CSS grid or flex. Let's say you're not allowed to, let's say, use CSS grid or flex. Can you do it like pure display property, position property, things like that?
Using float, I think we can divide it vertically.
Okay, but okay, so yeah,
not
float
vertically, I would say.
Yeah, float I would suggest not even use, because floats are not being used nowadays because it's too old, and also soon they will be deprecated. So if you look at the history of CSS, in the beginning they had floats, then they started using later on CSS2 version, they had display property, position property, they defined properly, right? And then now we have CSS grid, we have flex, and all that stuff.
Yeah, flex, using flex, we can do it. You have video on flex too, I saw that.
Yeah, but the flex, so flex and CSS grid are kind of a similar technology. But I would suggest, if you want to be good at CSS, I would suggest to understand, because other stuff not going away. Even though flex allows you to you should be able to, like, it's almost like a table, right? Flex allows you to make things like a grids, but inside you still have to put things the way you should be, right? So there you need the other knowledge as well. But for grids, you don't have to use table, you can use flex. Okay, so you can use combination of things to make your HTML page. Okay. um, all right, so I'm gonna run through the basics, some of the basics. If you think you're comfortable with it, let me know, so then we will move that accordingly. Okay. All right. So let's do one thing. For that, I'm just going to use CodePen. CodePen is pretty nice compared to JS Fiddle. All right. Okay, so here I have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So I'm just going to say, I don't want to look at JavaScript, so I'm just going to hide it. And I have HTML and CSS. Okay, so first of all, do you guys know what a selector is in CSS? What is a CSS selector?
ID, classes,
Yes, yes, to grab the elements, yes. So if I want to access element, I would need to use some sort of selector so I can differentiate between, okay, this element or this element, right? All hooks also. So let's say if I have div, there are three things you can use. ID, let's say I could equal to my ID or something, okay? I can use also class, class 1, or I can use attribute. Well, what is an attribute? So I can just say textith equal to my channel or something. Okay. Now, ID, class, and textith, they are all called attributes. Attributes are something that has key and a value, right? So my key is ID here, right? So I have actually three keys. So I have key ID and value my ID, right? Right? Same thing. So this is called attribute. ID is actually, you can call it attribute. And my ID is a value. So ID is a special kind of an attribute. It has a specific meaning to it, right? Class also is an attribute. And value is what? Class 1 here, right? And what about textith? Is it an attribute?
Just a custom, right?
Yes. It's a custom attribute. It is an attribute, but it's a custom attribute. So your HTML doesn't know what textith really means, but it knows it's one of the attributes. When you define ID, it has a specific meaning. It's like a unique identifier for this div. When I use class, it knows that this attribute has specific meaning. But when I use textith, it doesn't really know what that means. But it is an attribute. Okay. So textith is also an attribute. And it has a value called basically my channel. Okay. So I can use this attribute here to do something. So let's say if I want to change the color of this ID, I can use an ID selector. And all I have to do simple here is pound ID, or which is my ID here, right? And I can say, color is red, right? Okay, I don't have any, so let's say my element or something. Right, so I'm just gonna remove this. Okay, so now I get this red, which is my element. If I want to use class here, you'd have to use dot instead of pound, right? And instead of my ID, I have to say class1. And yeah, anybody know how to use custom attributes here?
Something I know, class.
Or we can just name it without using any dot or.
Yeah.
No, name in. If you do it without name, let's say text it doesn't work. This means actually tag name. So if I do div,
Dot.
so if I just do, if I wanna this, if I don't put any dot or pound, which means element name. Okay.
Yeah, that's it will not work text it here like this.
No, because it's not an element, right? It's an attribute. So as you can see, it's black right now, right?
Maybe you can make div dot text it.
No, it won't work. Dot is a dot is always means class. So I can say div dot class1, right? Now it's red. The dot means class. If I say div pound my ID, which means ID, right? As you can see, it's turning red. Or you can just simply use my ID. It doesn't. This div means doing this means we'll look at it later on, but this means only apply to divs, right? If I have a span, then with the same class, then it won't apply. Okay, but in this case, it means find. Let's say if I say dot class1, which means wherever you find this class1, apply color red, right? So if I have two elements, and let's say that this is a span, for example, and let's say I don't have the ID here and this attribute here, right? So it's applying both first my element and also span, right? So if I simply do, let's say div.class1, and it's only gonna apply the first one. This really means any element div with class1, which only this apply to this one. Okay. For the attribute, you have to use square brackets, and inside I can use um, hold on. Okay, like this. Or I can simply do this. Means if I have an attribute like textIt, just make it red.
So in the HTML also we don't need my channel. Can we do like this? Like only text it?
Yeah, you don't need to have. Yeah. Okay. So it's a custom.
When it comes, I did have heard first time from you like this.
Yeah. So you have three things. You have, so basically these are custom attribute. There are lots of uses for custom attribute. There is another um, custom attribute called data something. If you do like a data, we'll look at it later on. But if I say data name or something, okay. Here I just have to do. I think it's data. Sorry, name. Hold on, let me see. There's another. It's called data attributes. So I can type it like this: data column, this like this, and when I actually try to access the data from here, I can use article.dataset. So I have this article, and then I just have to use column. I don't have to use data after that. So it actually allows you to put, um, um, yeah, and you can also use it this way. It treats data attributes is treated differently. So you can use it in JavaScript with much ease. Special use for data attributes is when you do testing. So what I would do is if my element, when you do a testing, you want to know if I click on this element, I want to access the value, right? So you would use it, you would put the data test ID. So you would do something like the test ID or something. Okay, and then you can access this element through that and from the JavaScript. You can use ID and classes, but what you can do is when you actually really build the project, you can remove all the data test ID or ignore it, right? Because IDs and classes you want to use it for styling and all the other purposes, and data test ID you want to use it for testing purpose only or storing data. Technically, you are storing data using this attribute inside your HTML. Okay, we'll look at all that stuff later, but yeah, think of this way: three things, right? We learned today. This is attribute. You can actually do this as well. So ID is an attribute, right? I can, instead of using pound, I can also say, right? It's the same thing because it's an attribute. Right? This is exactly same as pound ID. Though I would prefer pound when I use this kind of attributes because it's a special attribute, right? But if it's a custom attribute, then I would use, um, square bracket. I have to use square bracket for the custom attributes. Okay. So these are the selectors. So we learned three things today here. If I have a div element name, I'll just simply use element name. If it's a custom attribute, I would use square bracket. Attribute name equal to value or just name. Okay. For IDs, you would use pound. For classes, you would use dot. Any question on this so far?
said something regarding the testing. So can you elaborate a little more on that?
Yeah. So let's say you want to test. Let's say if I build a React application, right? And now I want to, you know, let's say this is a button, for example, this div element, right? And what I want to do is, have you written any unit test or acceptance test?
Yeah, I wrote unit test, but that is not in this JS level.
Oh, okay.
That's in not this front end level.
Okay.
It's like all like server side.
Okay. So in a client side, when you write a test, what you can do is you can actually say you have to use the selector hooks. These are called hooks in your elements, which you can access. If I want to click on this div, I would say in the JavaScript, I would use like, let's say if I'm using jQuery, for example, right? So let's open the JavaScript. Then I would simply use like a pound my ID, right? Dot click or something. Okay. So I'm clicking on this event. So instead of my ID, I would use like a data test ID equal to, I'm gonna name this ID called my button or something. And here I would do like this, my button equal to my, let's say my not my button, data test ID equal to my button, right? And click on it. All right. So only basically test would use this to do it, to click on it, and then see like it opens some windows or something. I don't know, right? And what happens when you build your program? Really, you can say, hey, remove all the data test IDs. So this way, what happens? Let's say your UI guy say, I want the class. Let's say if I want to use this class 1 for the testing, right? And your test guy say, no, I don't like the name class 1 because this is a button to do this. I want so it's a conflict, right? So your designer who just actually applying styles using the class, and you using data test ID to test. So you have two separate things. So your tester keep using, I can use completely different name here than class, and it would not collide. And end of the day, you can just go to every element and remove this data test ID, right? Because you don't need it. You only need it for testing. So you can just go and say, hey, remove all the attributes which starts with data dash, and it would be removed. So because you only need it for testing. Real product, you don't need testing, right? So that's one of the use for that. Okay. I would suggest just practice. If you haven't done much, practice creating multiple elements like this, and use, I'll give you some homework as well regarding this, but try doing this. Okay, any questions? All right, so I think that's about it. And hey, Harshal, can you give me a call on this number? after. I just wanted to talk to you when you get a chance. Okay. Okay. Any questions? So what I'll do, I think next time we will do a box model, and for on H on so from now on, we'll spend maybe last half hour on HTML, on CSS, and I'll just cover all the important stuff. Um, and so next time we'll further we'll learn box model and in CSS, and then on JavaScript side we'll continue with functions. Okay, because functions, they have we haven't covered like default parameters. Then we look at the spread operators, and as an argument, which is called rest parameters, and yeah, everything related to functions basically for the next class.
And if I wanted to start with the CSS, like which material you want me to? Do you have any books, like, because for me it is like it is little I'm not much in the CSS part. I always I have knowledge on the server side.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So CSS, again, I think.
So I wanted, before coming to the class, I wanted to brush up myself so that whatever you are saying, I can understand that properly.
Yes.
Not a difficult thing, but only thing is that I should know the right parameters, right things to
Yeah.
do that. So you want me to go through any kind of books or materials? I would be more than happy to do that before coming here.
Unfortunately, there used to be this. Hold on. There used to be really good. There is a really good website for CSS. Let me see. Let's see. There is this website, CSS Tricks. Yes. Okay. This is probably my favorite website for CSS, and it has. I mean, this is for grade, but if you.
Just core CSS, not like
Yeah, core CSS. This has really, if you go through this, I mean, they may not have like a sort of like, okay, one by one, step by step, but I can point you that, okay, for examples, if you want to do selectors, right? CSS selectors, for example. Okay. I'll just say selectors. Pattern selectors and CSS, pseudo selectors, child. So it has lots of this, right? Okay, how about this? I will, with the homework, I will send you few of these links that we learn, and then also I might cover next time, so you can actually look at it in detail. Okay. And this is a pretty good. I learned a lot of things from this website. It's very advanced, and they give you. And what I like about CSS Tricks, it takes you deep inside the CSS. With CSS, you need foot control. Like, what the problem happens is that when you go, let's say, do a project, right? Real project. A lot of time you would try something. Oh, seems working, right? But as soon as you add some new element to it, everything breaks. Or this element would be here. That will, okay. So what the problem with CSS is, if you don't have a full control of how it works, it will always be confusing. So you need to gain that control, that you can look at the page and say, oh, you know what, this element has this problem here. Okay. So I want you to get that kind of control. Okay, that's why I'm starting from the selector, which is the first thing you need to do, because you're applying style using selector, right? So you need to understand selectors first, and then I'll go through like each property uh, on like most of the important properties. I'm not gonna go like borders and stuff like that, but any property that allows you to place the object, uh, scroll it, help you scroll it, move around, things like that, right? That allows you to build your layout and things like that. Uh, and then once you learn all of that, which might take about 3-4 weeks, then I'll take you through like CSS Grid or Flex. I think Flex is more nowadays famous than CSS Grids because um, the Flex has it's now being used. Flex came first, and then I think Grid, but they do this pretty much the same thing, right? So I'll go through that, which is kind of very important at the end. Um, so I want you to actually really practice it. So I'll give you exercises related to CSS as well, but small ones, so you can say, okay, place this. Right now, I'll just give you, for since what we haven't delved deep into it, I'll give you some basic exercise with CSS. But eventually I'll give you some more detailed one. Okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. And yeah, feel free to ping me if you have any questions or problems.
Sure, sure.
All right. And yeah.
Okay.
All right, guys. So I think that's about it. And I hope you guys have a good weekend.
Yeah, you too.
All right. And hey, Herschel, give me a call when you get a chance today. Yeah. Okay. All right. All right, guys. Talk to you later. Bye.